Now that we've added a component that allows users visiting pins to add their comments, how are we actually going to create those comments and display them in this pin content area? Well, first of all, when adding comments, we need to know what pin a given comment is being added to. So we'll need to know the pin ID, and we'll also need to have the comment text as provided in the input. So given that information that we need to have the pin ID and the comment text, we can head back to our type-defs file and add a new mutation in our root mutation type. And you could either call this mutation update pin or create comment. I'm going to call this create comment personally. And for its arguments, we know that create comment needs a pin ID of type ID as well as text of type string. And once this mutation resolves, it should return a pin. So heading to our resolvers, we'll go down to mutation. We'll add create comment, which will again get access to root, args, and context. And just to recall, let's revisit our pin model in the models folder. Remember that for our comments array, in order to create a new comment, we need to provide the text as well as the author, specifically the author ID, which will be populated according to the user model. So we need to provide for every created comment the text as well as the user that created it, which will be put on author. So in order to get information about the current user, we'll need to have authenticated wrapping our resolver function. That's going to allow us to get from context current user. So we'll create a variable called new comment. It's going to consist of the text coming from args.text, and the author will be set by context.currentUser._ID. And before we can add this new comment, we need to find the pin that this comment is going to be added onto. So we'll use an operation off the pin model called find one and update. So first we need to find the pin. So we'll pass in as the first argument a filter where we'll find the pin by its ID field. And the ID is going to come from args.pinID. And once we've found our pin, we'll provide a second argument which will describe how to update this particular document. We want to use the push operator with $push to push onto the comments array our new comment. And then for the final argument, we can specify that we want returned from find one and update the latest document by passing in new set to true. So we're finding a pin by its ID, we're pushing this new comment onto its comments array, and we're getting the latest document returned to us, the updated document returned to us. And remember finally that we need to populate both author and comments.author. So we'll chain on two more populate calls right after the find one and update. And we're going to put the result value in a variable called pin updated. Then at the end of this mutation, we'll just return pin updated. We will navigate to our GraphQL folder once again, head to mutations.js, add a new mutation variable, which we'll call create comment mutation. So for our mutation, we'll need to declare the variables pin ID with the type ID and required, as well as text, which will be of type string and required. Then we'll provide the name of our mutation, create comment, pass in our variables to their respective arguments. And from create comment, remember that we're returning a pin, so we'll get basically all of the pin fields. We'll get ID created at, title, content, image, latitude, longitude, then the author field where we'll get ID and name. And for comments, we'll get text, created at, author, name, and for author, name and picture. And if you're wondering why we're basically getting all of these pin values, it's because we're going to use the result of this mutation to replace the pin data that we have in state within the pins array for which a new comment is being added. In order to execute this new mutation, we'll head back to our create comment component, where we'll begin by importing our create comment mutation variable from //graphql/mutations, as well as our use client hook from //client. So we'll begin by executing use client and getting back our GraphQL client. Next, we want to store the text that's been put into the input in our local state. So let's create some state, or rather use some state with the use state hook. So use state will be initialized to an empty string, and we'll declare our variable as comment, and set comment will be the setter. You could also make this text if you like. And in order to update our state, we want to add an onChange to our input base, where we'll get an event, and then in an inline arrow function we'll call set comment and pass in e.target.value. We'll make input base controlled, so we'll give it a value prop and set that to comment, so we can clear this input out when we submit our form. We want to disable both of our buttons when there's nothing typed into the input, so we'll add a disabled prop to both of our icon buttons. So we'll set each of them to not comment.trim. And then this first button will be to clear the input. So we'll add an onClick here and an inline arrow function where in the return we'll just execute set comment and pass in an empty string. But for the send button, for the button to the right, we'll add an onClick, which will be linked to a new function called handle submit comment. So above our return we'll write handle submit comment, and this will be an async function. And to execute our mutation, first we need our variables put in a variables object. So our two arguments again are pin ID, that will come from our global state, so we need to use context and bring in context. We'll import it from //context. We'll use context and destructure our state object. So pin ID is going to come from state.currentPin._ID, and the text argument is going to be set to the value stored in our comment variable. Then we can await client.request, pass in our create comment mutation, and then our variables. Will get returned to us our data object, from which we can destructure create comment, and then using this create comment as our payload, we can dispatch a new action to update our state, and the type will be create comment, and create comment, the variable will be our payload. So we'll need to destructure dispatch from use context, from the object returned from use context, and then finally within handle submit comment, we want to clear out our input by executing set comment and passing in its initial value of an empty string. Then we'll head to our reducer. We'll create a new case for create comment. As I mentioned here, we're basically taking the return value from our mutation, and once we have our updated pin with the added comment, we're going to go through the entire pins array, find the pin with an ID that matches what we have on our payload, and then swap out the old pin with the new pin. So we'll declare a variable called updated current pin, and we'll set it to our payload. So now we want to find and replace, and in order to perform this find and replace, we'll use the map function. So we'll say state.pins.map. We'll map over each pin, and when we find the pin ID that matches the updated current pin ID, the ID of the pin returned from our mutation, we want to swap out that array element with updated current pin. So we'll just return updated current pin with the help of this ternary. Otherwise, for the rest of the pins in the array that don't match, we'll just return their original value pin. And we'll set this return value from the map function to updated pins, and then we'll return an object where we spread in state. Pins will be updated pins, and to immediately display the changes to our user that just added a comment, we'll make current pin, the current pin that they have selected, updated current pin. Now we can save all of these files, and we'll make sure that we're not getting any errors. And it looks like in the resolvers file, I forgot to make the create comment resolver function async. Other than that, looks like everything's good. So let's test this out. We'll try adding a new comment to one of our pins. So I'll click on this one and provide my comment. I'll just say sweet pick and then hit the send button, and it looks like there was an error. I made one small typo with the create comment mutation. This should be created at instead of created. So I'll try this once again. I'll select a pin, say sweet pick. So after the comment was submitted, we see the inputs cleared out, the buttons are disabled again, and we see underneath our first comment with the user's picture displayed as their avatar, their comment, as well as the comment author's name. As a short addendum to this video, if you'd like to display the time when a given comment was created, we can provide that right next to the comment author's name by re-adding the set of fragments that we removed initially on this secondary prop for the list item text component, and then right underneath the closing typography tag, interpolate comment.createdAt. And I'm going to add a middle dot to separate the author name and the created at timestamp. So if we save that and take a look at the result, we now see the created at timestamp for the comment. And in order to better format this timestamp, we can use another function from the date FNS library. So within comments, we'll import distance in words to now from date function / distance _ in _ words to _ now. And then we will call this function and pass to it comment.createdAt. And after this interpolated value, we can just chain on the text ago. So if we save our comments component and take a look at the result, one last thing that we need to do is once again pass this to the number function, convert the timestamp to a number, and once that's done, we should see how long ago a given comment was posted, and in this case it was about 4 hours ago.